Hi everyone, welcome to another series, another part of our data analysis technique series. So today, we were talking about examples and type of questions a data analyst or data scientist should ask before starting a new project. We've spoken about some concept before now. So as you know, this is the part 5 of this series. So I would encourage you, if you've not watched the previous parts, kindly go watch them because this series is building upon one another. So back to what we are discussing today. So what are the type of questions that you're supposed to ask when you are about to start a new project? It's best to have clarity on these questions so as to help you and you don't get stuck in the middle of a project. So these are not questions that are more project driven. These are questions that would allow you have sort of a clearer picture with you and your stakeholder. So the first thing is, what does the stakeholder want? So in this context, the stakeholder could be either your line manager, either the CEO of your company, either someone who consulted you to do a project, basically the people or the group or an individual who is interested or who is asking you to run your analysis. So the first question you want to ask yourself, if this is not communicated clearly to you, or you want to ask a stakeholder, is this just an analysis? What do I mean by just analysis? Am I writing reports? Am I read interpreting? So you want to know, is there more to the analysis? Am I collecting the data? So who is the stakeholder? Are they people like in academia or industry? How familiar are they with data analysis concepts? So all of those things would give you an idea of the kind of analysis you are going to run and also how you're going to interpret. Because if you are, in a way, your stakeholder is someone who is very high level, it's going to influence the way you also write your reports. If there's also someone that like they don't really know much about data analysis, it's going to influence the kind of analysis you even do or the kind of reports you write. So like I said, how familiar are they with data analysis? So that would also determine the type of technical jargons that you are communicating with them. So if it's someone who knows a whole lot, so you want to like show that you know some terms. If it's someone who doesn't know a lot, when you start mentioning columns and rows, they might feel like, what are you saying? But you want to be clear as much as possible for whoever the stakeholder is. So that's like the first step. Try to know, who am I working on this project for? And these are like very good skills a data expert should have, because it's not just about running analysis, it's also about solving problem. And if you don't know this basic stuff, it might probably be an issue in the long run. Um, Also, you need to know what is the overarching goal or question. So in this context, what is the goal? Like, are we trying to find something? Are we trying to show something? Are we like, what is the goal? So you have to be able to put in what, or the stakeholder has to be able to put in what like they want you to do. So like I said, it depends on like the level of skill the stakeholder has. Some people might know nothing or might know less about their data or the project they want to do, and they just ask you, help me run analysis, and they expect you to perform a magic. But if you can, in a way, be clear before you start the project, you understanding what is the overall goal of this project is going to guide your thinking process when you start your analysis. So, for example, if somebody gives you like a data like this, and they do not give you a goal, or they do not tell you what they want to do with the data. So right now we are speaking from the data perspective. So they give you a data, you don't know what the goal is. So let's say the goal is something like, we want to explore the effect of demographic factors on income. So demographic factors here are like, let's say gender, urbanity, marital status on income. So that's like what they want to explore. So that's the goal. That's like overall goal. So something they could also say another goal could also be we want to look at the overall sales of each product. So let's say the stakeholder they actually give you a question or they tell you this is your overall goal for some reason. Probably this is a data that they gave you from mere looking at this data, you could see that this data might not be able to solve this goal or this like overarching question. So it's either phrased as a question or phrased as a sentence. So if it's phrased as a sentence, it's actually mostly called objective. That's the term we use. If it's phrased as a question, it's just called like a question. So you need to be very clear what is the goal. So when you sort of have a clearer picture of what the goal is, then this is going to lead you to you breaking down the goal into specifics, objective or specific question. So someone gives you this kind of data again and asks you, we want to know what is like the demographic factor, what's the effect of demographic factor on income. And then you start to look at the data yourself. Probably if the stakeholder is so like explicit, they are going to tell you what the specific questions are. But if they do not tell you what the specific questions are, yourself, you can also break it down. So these are like the conversations you have before you start your analysis. So you might not have a clearer picture of everything once you start working on a couple of projects, but just mere glancing at the data, you could quickly find out, okay, what are the kind of questions that we can ask? Most times your data, we have so many columns. So one of the things I could advise you to do is to look at like the data and probably create a copy of the data and reduce some column, figure out, oh, this column sort of makes sense. Oh, these columns looks as though they are relating to one another because what we do to an extent is commonsensical, right? Some things will not relate to one another and some things will just naturally relate. So it's just like when somebody thinks of Heidi and children, I mean, this would not necessarily relate to one another, but you can think of number of children and income and probably number of children and marital status. When somebody says number of children and rating, you're like, how does that make sense? So that's like what we do. So you also have to bring your intuition into being a good or a great data expert. So one of the things we can break down this question into based on this data that we have, just looking at it, even though the stakeholder did not give us any particular question, we can say what is the average income for the customers. Imagine this is a customer data. So maybe they ask, you can also ask what is this, which sex is more likely to earn more. So right now, this is a bivariate level of analysis. So trying to combine two data. The first is a univariate level analysis. We spoke about univariate and bivariate in previous videos. You could go watch what they mean. You also talked about find the average income by marital status and urbanity. So, right, this is also multivariate. We are combining three variables together. So, when you have this guide of these questions, typically, maybe three, four will be okay. So, it doesn't matter that you have to have every specific questions that you would answer in your analysis at the initial stage. There are some things that you figure out during your analysis, but having a guide, having something that, oh, this is what I want to do, and it's going to help you go back. So you're like, I want to solve this problem instead of just going in a whirlwind of what am I doing? This is so much of information. So remember we spoke about having a general objective or overarching objective, then intentionally breaking them down into specifics if your stakeholder did not give you that. These are things that you do before you run any analysis. The next thing is you want to skim and scan the data set. So quickly skim and scan the data set. If the stakeholder gives you like an objective, ask yourself, are the variables to answer the question available in the data sets? So sometimes you might not have a full grasp of this. At least if the stakeholder asks you 3 to 4 questions, you should be able to at least find one or two that you are sure the data could answer. And this goes back to when you are running your analysis and the stakeholder says, help me run this type of analysis. So you can tell them, oh, based on the data that you have available, we probably would not be able to run that type of analysis. Imagine the stakeholder asks us here, what is the average income by age? Here we have the income, but we do not have the age. So there's nothing we can do about that. So it's not your fault that I don't have the age in the data set, except your stakeholder wants you to go collect the data. So and that is where if you want to collect a data, you want to carry out a survey, and we'll be talking about that in like subsequent videos. So you need to be clear about the questions or what is the overall goal and the specific goal of that survey. So that's also going to guide you in the questions you are going to ask in the when you carry out the survey. So this is just make sure you scan the data. If sometimes you might have multiple data sets, like maybe 3 to 4, that you'd have to merge in your analysis, just try to look at them. One skill to look at them, like I spoke earlier, is to reduce like the columns. So you can say, okay, let me take out ID, let me take out the dates the data was collected, let me take out some variables that I think might not be useful, because when you collect survey, there are always information that might not be needed. Even sometimes demographic information are collected and it might not be needed for the analysis. So you just, it helps you to have a better picture when you have a lesser version of your data. But like I said, make sure you have a copy of the original one before you start to distort your data set. So there are two possibilities when working on a project. So one possibility is you have your question available or you have to create them. So if you are working on a project and you do not have a question available or an objective available, that doesn't mean you should not embark on the project. So part of your intuitive thinking, or that even makes sense more if you are in a way creating the project or creating the question, it means that you are going to ensure you create questions that the data can answer. And if the questions are available, objective are available, that's great. So other possibilities that the data is available or you have to collect them yourself. Most times data are always available. So, but if they are not available, you can always create a survey to collect them yourself. And that possibility is that the code book is available or the code book is not available. So when you are speaking with the stakeholder, if you figure out that you're having a large data set, one of the things that could also help you prove your expertise is when you ask them, do you have a code book or do you have a metadata? Even though they do not know what a code book or a metadata is, mere you asking them that question might make them curious of what do you mean? Like that means you know what you're doing. So just to reiterate, a code book is a data that describes data. So if you have a data that shows us, oh, this is the income, this is what it means, this is what marital status means, and things like that. So that would be helpful for you. If a codebook is not available and the data is available, one of the things you can try to do is look at the columns, look at the columns of each of the data, that is the variables, and see if you can know what they mean intuitively. So if they write master, then you should know that okay, and the levels means single, married, then you can know that okay, I know this is marital status and this is single married. But they wrote something like marital status, they wrote 1, 2, 3, even though it's a categorical variable. I don't know if one is married or two is single, or they wrote sex and they say 1 and 0. Which one is male? Which one is female? So don't just assume because it's one is going to be male, 0 is going to be female. So don't make blind assumptions with your data if you are not very clear. And one of the great qualities of a data expert is that you ask questions. Um, Moving forward, so you also want to speak about delivery timeline. And this is one thing you want to do. You want to avoid giving a definite time. And this is the last point here, which I think is like the most important point. So when you start a project as a data analyst, there are a lot of things that could come up that you can account for at the initial stage of doing your project. One of it is how clean is the data. So if your data is quite clean, you would not take much of time. Sometimes if you have, say, 60 minutes, if you eventually spend 60 minutes on a project, sometimes it takes about 45 minutes or even 50 minutes to even clean the data, and analysis is just about 10 or 15 minutes. So you have to understand how data analysis work for you to know, oh, I need to clean the data. So if the data is really, really dirty, so when we mean dirty, it doesn't mean like there's a stain. It means that you have to transform. For example, what do I mean by dirty data? I mean, for example, for these children, there's something called like 2.1. For this meal, some are in capital letter, some are in small letter. Like it's just all we're going to show us example of a data that is not clean and the data that is somewhat clean. So most times when you work on project, your data is not going to be clean. So and that's why there's been a lot of software that can automate the process for you. Imagine you have 10,000 records and you have to clean every row manually or every column manually. So that's going to take a whole lot of time. And that's why you want to learn. There are some data that are so like in the name is word data that with your point and click tool, it's going to be very difficult to clean them. So imagine in this analysis, they wrote this income. Initially, they wrote $10,000. They added dollar to the income. Even though this is a numerical data, the fact that there's dollar there, you can analyze it as a numerical data. So you have to remove the dollar. Then would you then start removing every one of them individually? So that would not make any sense. So imagine they wrote two child, three child, four child, instead of writing just two, three, five, or zero, then that's something that you have to clean. So, and because of you, sometimes when you have your data set, you might not know how much of cleaning is required. That is why you you sort of don't want to give like a definite time. So in your delivery timeline, you can have an estimate of, oh, this is how long I'm going to take to clean. Make sure what you are doing is an estimate. So also one of the things that could also affect your delivery timeline is how detailed is your report going to be, or how detailed your analysis is going to be. Do they just have two questions that they want me to answer? Is it just three questions? Am I writing analysis? Am I writing the report also? Am I writing a dashboard? So all of those things will affect your delivery timeline. So break down part of the project and add estimated times. So you could have something like data cleaning, 3 days, data analysis, 2 days, report writing, 4 days, etc. Maybe one day. So you want to do that, that might be helpful for you. So you also want to check what's the number of columns that the data have, so not rows. So these are columns, these are columns, these are columns, these are columns, these are columns. If your data has more columns, it means most likely that you have more work to do or more analysis to run. We don't care about the number of rows, even though we have 5 rows or 10,000 rows. That is not an indication of how complex analysis is going to be. It might be indication if you are manually cleaning your data, but if you're cleaning your data in an automated way, you would not care about the rows. So, I mean, what I mean here is that the most important factor in delivery, that could factor in is the number of columns that you have also. So, like I said, avoid giving a definite time. Ensure what you are saying is estimated time. So the last thing is, can you explain the topics in your words? So one of the things you want to do after you're done discussing with the stakeholder, tell them, oh, this is what I think you want me to do. Tell them what the project expectations are. Ask questions when you are not clear. Ensure you always say to the stakeholder again what either you are chatting with them after everything is done, give like a summary of a report and say, okay, this is what you expect of me, and this is what I'm supposed to do. Is that the same with you? Then that sort of like makes sense, right? So you guys are on the same page. So picture of what analysis looks like. So have a picture of what the analysis will look like. Immediately you start your project. If you are just doing project for the first few time, you may not have a clearer picture, but after running analysis for like a while, when somebody asks me to do what is the average rating, give me this by this, I can sort of picture what the analysis is going to look like. So start to picture what the analysis is going to look like even before you start your project. Oh, are they requirements? That means I'm going to do a graph. That means I'm going to do a table. And does this sound like something I can do? So if you're not sure of, oh, this project doesn't sound like something you can do, you can either, if you have a break that you can take, you can ask from people who are experienced. And that's one thing about data experts. We ask help from one another. So you can ask help from someone who is experienced and say, oh, do you know how to run this kind of analysis? Or do you mind breaking down what the stakeholder wants from me? And the person can explain to you in your term and say, oh, this is actually what the stakeholder wants, and this is not something very complex. I myself, I can't run every type of analysis because the field is so wide that like there's just so many things, there's just so many parts of it, there's just so many fields that are like emerging with data analysis right now. So I know what I know what I don't know. So when you ask me to do a project and I know it's something I can quickly learn in few weeks based on my time, I could take on the project. If it's something I really don't know, or let's say the part of the project I know about 80% or 70%, I'll pick up the project and try to learn the other ones. But if it's entirely or majority I don't know the project, I'll rather not pick up your project. So these are like, so learn to choose your struggles as a data expert. So know when you're in your learning phase or when you're an expert. That's why you have to keep learning, and you have to keep learning. So do you need to do I need to reach out for help to understand the project better? How the picture of what the analysis will look like? Like, is this a great deal in, like, it's a great deal in your analysis process? So have a picture of what the analysis is going to look like. Like I said, know like, oh, I will need a graph for this. For example, for this type of analysis, if I'm just supposed to run urbanity, I could either do just a table or do a bar chart here. Here I could run some other type of analysis and things like that. So when we get to the part of the type of analysis to run for numerical, for categorical data, for bivariates, for univariates, we're going to be talking more about that. So when you see two numerical data, what kind of analysis am I running? If I see two categorical data, what type of analysis am I running? If I see one numerical, one categorical data, what type of analysis am I going to run? Importance of getting things clarified. So you do not want to get stuck in the middle of a project. You want to be on the same page with the stakeholder. It proves credibility and experience on data analysis. Imagine I'm talking with two persons to work on a project for me, and one person tells me, oh, I can do it. Just send me the data. Another person is asking me questions about my project. I'll feel more confident about this person clarifying things with me because I feel like they would really know what they're doing based on the questions that they ask. And so I think that's why you also even have to ask questions. There are times whereby I even ask questions when I want to take on project, things I know already, that's already in data set. So just to prove my credibility to the client or the stakeholder that, oh, I really know what I'm doing. So there's something called ND, non-disclosure agreement. So sometimes some projects might require you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. What does this mean? It means that you are not supposed to send their data to someone else because data is something that could be private for some company. So when you are done with the analysis, you don't want to share your data or maybe use your data as a tutorial for someone because maybe their competitor, if their competitor has the data, their competitor will know their weakness. So they might ask you to sign an NDA. So it's not something complex. Just make sure you read the agreement well and whatever the clause is. You could also offer to sign an NDA if the client is skeptical about releasing their data, that, oh, I'm not sure I really want to give you this data for this analysis. So that's something that you might come across. So make sure you know what this means. It means non-disclosure agreement. So conclusion, just make sure you read more, familiarize yourself with this explanation. Remember that a journey of 1,000 miles, start with a step, and be curious, set goals, and remember you can do this. So if you would love to learn more, kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel, share this video to your friends, turn your notification bell, and you can check it out on our website, www.velonti.com, and follow us on our social media platform at velonti_VT. Thank you so much for your time. See you in our subsequent videos.